Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be covering a tactical concept that you just absolutely have to know if you want to become a better player, if you want to improve, if you want to make it to that next level. And that tactical concept is called the classic bishop sacrifice, also called the Greek gift, is what some people call it. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on that notification icon. Now, the classic bishop sacrifice can actually come up in I want to say a number of scenarios. So where I see it the most often for some reason is in the French defense. So I'm just going to show you some scenarios from the French defense. So we're going to start with e4 and then e6, d4, d5, knight c3, and we're going to have the winnower variation of the French. This is one situation where I actually see it quite often. And we're going to play pawn to e5 and then c5. We're going to play a3, takes on c3, b takes c3, knight e7. We're going to develop knight to f3. Castle's kingside, we're going to play bishop to d3, and then we're going to have black miss the threat, we're going to have black play c4. So this is kind of one of the more ideal circumstances for the Greek gift. We have pretty much a easy way to bring in all of our pieces. We have a dark squared bishop and a queen that can come into this attack. This is the main idea behind the Greek gift. So we play bishop takes h7, king takes h7, knight g5, and then the idea is that when this king retreats to g8, we're going to bring in this queen with queen h5, and we're going to be threatening mate on the h7 square, and we're going to be threatening mate on the f7 square. Now, the thing is, we do need ways to follow up our position if we have this type of scenario. So if, for example, they play rook e8, apparently the best, according to the computer, is to eventually force mate by bringing this bishop to a3. It is also possible, though, because of the position of this queen, to simply do kind of a walk-down check. So this is a little bit easier for human beings to see, like we can play queen h7 check, king f8, queen h8 check, hitting that king. Notice that there is only one move here. They have to play knight g8. Now we can play knight h7. Again, there is only one move. They're going to have to play king e7. And then we can play bishop g5 check. And this is going to skewer this king and queen. So if the king sidesteps, we're taking the queen for free. Also, if we block in the logical way with the pawn, we're going to have queen g7 mate. So the only real way to block would be something like knight to f6, in which case we could play queen takes g7, and of course now everything is going to fall. We get to keep all our pawns and everything else. Now, if you want to play the absolute most accurate way to follow up this particular attack with the queen, bishop, and knight, it's actually bringing this bishop to a3. So this is another typical way that we can follow up this attack. Is what we're going to do is we're going to play queen takes f7 first, bring the queen back, king over, and we've gained a pawn, we've opened up the position, but we can't quite win the game yet because we still need more ammunition. So now, if we walk down with this check and check, the knight will be able to block and we're not going to get mate. But the computer says there's no way for black to stop this. He can't walk away from it. If, for example, king to f8, we're going to have queen f7 mate. If rook to f8, we're going to have queen h7 mate. So there's actually not a good defensive move to simply deal with the threat of bishop a3, followed by queen h7, queen h8 mate. So if, for example, knight c6, we simply play bishop a3, and after, say, another random move, we're just going to play queen h7. Queen h8 is checkmate. That knight is pinned. There is no knight g8, and the game is basically over. So that would be how we would get mate in the most efficient manner, according to the computer. So there's a number of different scenarios where the classic bishop sacrifice works, but we need to know when it doesn't work. Now, in this case, it works against all lines. Now, it is very common for the king to sometimes try to walk up in the classic bishop sacrifice to avoid the worst of it. So king g8, queen h5 is clearly winning, so clearly we need to walk forward. This makes a lot of sense. But in this case, we have backup in the form of the h-pawn coming forward. So if, for example, king g6, now if king h6, it's really straightforward. King h6, we have the immediate knight e6 or knight f7 check, followed by knight takes d8, winning the queen. So that's a pretty straightforward win. But if king g6, we actually have to shove our h-pawn forward. We have to play something like h4. The point is we're actually just threatening pawn to h5. And there is just not a good way to stop pawn to h5, and it is a super powerful move. It's a very deadly threat. So if, like, for example, f5, we're going to play h5, king h6, and then knight e6 check comes, and then knight d8 check, and we're completely winning. So that's how we handle the forward movement of the king in this position. In this case, we have the backup of the pawn. In some cases, you're actually already castled, or you've already played f4, and the rook can even come in for backup. Like, we can bring the rook in, like rook f3, rook h3 in some scenarios. But I want to cover some scenarios where the classic bishop sacrifice doesn't quite look this clean, and it's not quite as perfect. And we need to look at scenarios where it's not quite as perfect, but it still works, and also scenarios where it just simply doesn't work, where we could be completely lost. Okay, so again, we're going back to the French defense, but I'm going to have a slightly more open position in the French defense. We're going to have d takes e4, knight takes e4, and there's a lot of different moves that people can try here. So one move people can try is they can play the move bishop e7. We're going to play knight f3. They're going to play knight f6. We're going to exchange, and we're going to play bishop d3. Now, after castles, we can set up the classic bishop sacrifice with the move pawn to h4. And this is not a bad move by any stretch of the imagination. Pawn to h4 is a really cool move. It's very similar to the fishing pole trap, where when we plant a piece here, if they take it, we're going to take back, and we're going to open up that rook file. It's a very valuable move to reinforce the idea of playing bishop takes h7, followed by knight g5. And actually, this is the biggest threat on the table right now, and it needs to be met. This bishop takes h7 threat in this position is huge. Black needs to meet this threat. So if black does nothing, if black is just like, whatever, I'm just going to develop pieces, bishop takes h7 in this scenario is winning. Even though the position is open and there's a lot more going on, it's not as closed as the previous position, there really is no way to defend after knight g5. We're not going to be able to bring that king up to either h6 or g6. H6 should be pretty obvious. Like if king h6, we have either knight f7 or knight e6 simply winning. If king g6, we're going to follow with queen d3 check. Keep in mind you have other options on where to move your queen. Often d3, c2, or g4 work very well as alternative options. In my experience, queen d3, at least in my repertoire, seems to work more often than queen g4, and also h4, h5 typically should be explored before the move queen g4. I've had queen g4 be a mistake more than once, but every once in a while, queen g4 is the correct approach to meeting king g6, so it is a tactical resource you want to keep in mind whenever you're employing the classic bishop sacrifice. But here, like we would have king here, if king h6, queen h7 is clearly mate, so king h5, we would play g4 check, and if king h6, queen h7 is mate, and if king g4, queen f3 is mate. So we're basically losing on any forward move. If we take the knight, we're running into the fishing pole scenario. So bishop takes, we play h takes, and every single move here is going to be complete total suicide. If king g8, we are bringing our queen into h5, threatening mate on not just one square, but two squares. So moving the rook over won't help because rook h8, queen h8 will still be mate. And if f6, we're going to close that. We're going to close that net with the move pawn to g6, and whatever black's next move is, queen h7 or queen h8 will be mate. So he'd really have to play king g8. There's nothing else really to calculate. Then we're going to have queen h5. We're threatening queen h7 mate. Rook e8 is forced. Nothing else to calculate. Queen f7 check. King h8. Queen back to g6. Threatening mate on h7. King g8. And this position is a winning attack for white, although it's not so easy to just declare victory. It's basically black's pieces are tied down, and we can take advantage of that. White should just continue with just development. He should just play bishop to f4, and this should eventually win. White just has a winning attack. So the line given by the computer, like something like bishop b7, we would play queen f7, king h8, then we would take on c7, taking more material. The problem here is that the queen has very limited options. Like we can't play queen d4 because the rook is hanging. We can't move the rook over or up because then we're closing the box off for the king. So for example, if rook e7, we're playing queen h7, queen h, so if for instance rook e7, we have this is going to be forced mate. So that right there is going to be checkmate, and the game is going to be over. So these are problems for black. Black has a very difficult time doing anything at all to save his position. So if, for example, queen d7, we could play the queen back to g6, threatening mate, king back to g8, we could simply play bishop e5, takes, and I mean, really the position is lost. Like, we're going to bring the rook to d1, and we have ways to continue the attack. Again, we can't play rook e7, we can't play queen e7 without falling into this queen h7, queen h8 mate, and we just can't really do very much at all to improve or to save our position. So an example of what could happen, like bishop d5, rook d1, knight c6, we could just play, something to just slowly improve. f4, rook a d8, and we would lose because as soon as we play a move like rook a d8, we block off the oxygen for our king, and our king gets mated. So these mate threats are always on the table. So we could try to run. We could play king f8. We could just castle, king here, c4, picking up this piece, and white just has a huge advantage, and the black king is still in the firing range. So this is an example of where the classic bishop sacrifice works, but it's muddy. The advantage is going to be long-term, and it's just going to be this really muddy attack that's just going to continue for an extended period of time. So now let's look at two scenarios where the classic bishop sacrifice simply doesn't work, and one of them is in this exact same line. So here, black could play pawn to c6. Now at this point, the best move is just to play something like queen e2, and this should actually be probably major advantage white. Like, white's actually doing much, much better in this position. His overall attacking chances against the black king are just really, really good here. Even if he just follows up with something really simple like queen e4 and h5 on the next couple of moves, he's doing spectacularly well. This is a really good position for white. But it looks tempting. Like, why can't I still play my bishop takes h7 attacking idea? Why can't I do this classic bishop sacrifice? Well, in this case, black has kind of a very interesting defense, and the classic bishop sacrifice doesn't work. So if we play bishop takes h7 here, king takes h7, knight g5, king g8, queen h5, black can block absolutely everything and stop the attack with the move, pause the video and see if you can find it, queen a5 check. And then after bishop d2, he's going to shuffle that queen to f5, and that holds the h7 square. And this is really important because he didn't have to move the f8 rook. So we don't have this intermediary check to continue the attack. This just shuts the attack completely down. White has nothing here for the piece. So white would have absolutely no compensation under these conditions. Another situation where we would have very little for the attack, we would go back to, say, knight d7 and this very similar line. Knight f3, knight gf6, knight f6, knight f6, bishop d3, bishop e7, bishop g5, castles, h4, b6, bishop f6, bishop f6. And this looks very similar to what we just had. It looks almost like a carbon copy. We have this queen on d8, and it doesn't look like they have queen a5, queen f5. It looks like bishop to h7 followed by knight g5 should very much be on the table. But it's not. This scenario is actually unsound for white to play the classic bishop sacrifice because we don't have this important attacking piece that can join the fun. So when you play bishop takes h7 here, and they respond with king takes h7, and you play knight g5, they have safe haven on h6. And after king h6, this position is actually major advantage black. White doesn't have enough attacking pieces left to continue the attack in an effective way and break through. So black actually has a winning position here. White has no good way to proceed. So that's basically how the classic bishop sacrifice works. That's how the different scenarios within the classic bishop sacrifice works. Sometimes the classic bishop sacrifice works, and it works very well. It works beautifully. And we have to be very careful about situations where it doesn't. So situations where it doesn't is when, of course, this king can come up and we don't have enough pieces for follow-ups. And then another situation where it doesn't work is in situations where they can bring a piece. They can simply bring that king back, and they can bring a piece to defend the h7 square, or they can bring a knight in to defend the h7 square. That's another scenario where oftentimes the classic bishop sacrifice will get pushed back. So there's one variation here I'll give. I know a lot of you are probably looking at it like, why can't we just play queen d2? Queen d2 doesn't quite work in this particular case. Queen d4 is quite strong. So just queen takes d4, and I know it looks like we should still be okay, like we have this double check, but then of course just king g6, and we are just completely, totally losing here. So after king to g6, black can hold this position together, and not just hold the position together, everything's hanging. The knight on f7 is hanging, the queen on d2 is hanging. So anyways, this is what we got to know. This is what we got to learn. We got to learn when the classic bishop sacrifice works, when it doesn't. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can apply some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.